say, if you want to pray,
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام.
الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة. حي على الصلاة. حي على الفلاح. حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله.
دائما لا إله إلا الله. اللهم ربنا ولك الحمد والدعوة التامة والصلاة القائمة على سيدنا محمد وسيدنا ورسول الله وتوسل العافية والرفعة وبعث اللهم مقاما الذي وعدته لك بالإيمان. اللهم هذا مقام ينبغي لأهل الصلاة اللهم أحسن وقوفنا بين يديك. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله. أدى الرسالة ونصح الأمة وتركها على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك. Indeed, all thanks, all praise, all gratitude is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him and we ask for His forgiveness and we invoke Him against the evils of our own souls and the evils of our own actions. Whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, nobody can misguide him. And whomever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leaves astray, then there's no hope for him, nobody can guide him. And I testify, and I bear witness, that there is no deity, no God worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I testify, and I bear witness, that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is his last messenger and best worshipper. يقول عز من قائل في محكم كتابه بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. ويقول أيضا بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His glorious Quran says, which means, O believers, have God consciousness, have God awareness, fear Allah the way He deserves to be feared, and die not except in the state of Islam, the state of full submission to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And He also says, which means, O people, O mankind, He, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one who created you from a single soul. And from that soul He created its spouse. And from the both of them He created the multitude of human beings who are the entirety of the humankind. He is the one who watches our affairs. أما بعد, as for what follows. When I was preparing to come visit you, your beautiful masjid, your beautiful community, when I was preparing for this khutbah, I had decided that I'm not going to talk about Gaza, and I'm not going to talk about Palestine. I told myself, I'm sure that this community, like every other community in the United States, have been talking and watching the news and rallying and donating and fundraising for Palestine and for Gaza for the past 5 months. And I'm sure it's going to be difficult for them to bring up the same topic. I'm sure it's difficult for them to remind them of the tragedies that are going on. But yesterday something happened that I simply cannot avoid talking about. As I was watching the news yesterday, we saw a group of people in the northern part of Gaza, civilians who have been cut off all aid and all support and all medical supplies for weeks, maybe months, to the point where the people were at the brink of starvation, to the point where the people are eating things that are not halal for us to eat. Rotten food, animal food, things that should not be allowed for a human being to consume. And then they were told yesterday that some aid is going to enter in the northern part of Gaza. And people gathered by the thousands in an area where snipers snipe even innocent children and women raising white flags. In an area where even ambulances going to save children get bombed and get shelled with missiles. Those fathers were gathered in that dangerous area, in that dangerous zone, all night long. And then at 4 a.m., while they were gathering around a few aid trucks that came in, machine gun fire was opened upon all of them, killing, wounding, injuring hundreds. One eyewitness testimony that stuck in my mind in yesterday's report, a man describes a scene that he saw where a father of a family was carrying a bag of flour, trying to bring this bag of flour to his kids. And as he was carrying that bag, he was targeted and he was shot. After he fell down, he stood up again and carried the same bag, only to be targeted for a second time. And he was shot for a second time. Then he stood up and carried the bag of flour for the third time, and for the third time, he was shot, and he was martyred for the crime of being hungry as being a Palestinian in Gaza, for the crime of trying to bring a little bit of aid to his starving kids, and possibly his starving wife, who's waiting for him to bring them some relief after months of suffering. I know that all of you have been trying in different ways, and every Muslim and every free human being has been trying in different ways to relieve the situation. And we talked, all of us, and I'm sure here, about rallies and what congressman to email and what senator to call and what rally to attend and what fundraiser and what charity to donate to. All of that has been talked about. All of that you know. Yet, if we continue this way, this is not the solution. This is not going to bring the change we need to relieve the suffering of our brothers and sisters. Because even when this unjust war ends, and it will end, inshallah, and those brothers and sisters of ours will be victorious, inshallah, regardless of how it ends and when it ends. But when this horrific war ends, if we simply study the recent history, we realize before Gaza there was Yemen, and before Yemen there was Syria, and before Syria there was Afghanistan, and before Afghanistan there was Iraq. And so just studying the simple history, we'll realize after Gaza there's going to be another Gaza. Somewhere else, another country, in another community. More innocent people will be suffering. Because instead of focusing on the relief of our brothers and sisters, we should start thinking in a new way. I am here to challenge you to dream in a bigger way, to find a bigger strategy, a better strategy. What is that strategy? What is that goal? If we look in the history and in the lifetime of our beloved Prophet, who is our example, who we should look at when we are facing troubles, we find that our beloved Prophet ﷺ, even though him and his blessed companions dealt with tragedies and dealt with pain and dealt with suffering, Rasulullah ﷺ did not consider the victory is to stop the pain being inflicted on Bilal ibn Rabah. That was not the victory Rasulullah seeked. Even though Rasulullah and Abu Bakr freed Bilal to alleviate his pain. But that was not the victory Rasulullah was trying to get to. Rasulullah ﷺ witnessed Ammar ibn Yasir and his parents, Ammar's parents were martyred while being tortured in Mecca. So the victory Rasulullah ﷺ was seeking was not to take Abu Jahl to the UN or Abu Lahab to the Supreme Court of Justice, the ICJ, or take or inflict sanctions on Umayyah for torturing Bilal. That was not the victory that Rasulullah was seeking, even though he tried in every single way possible to relieve the pain and suffering of his companions. The real victory that eventually caused the removal of all the suffering of the Ummah was when Rasulullah ﷺ fulfilled his mission. When the people of Mecca themselves, the one who were oppressing the Rasul ﷺ and oppressing his companions, realized that the goal of Muhammad ﷺ, which was successful, was to convert the hearts and minds of those people. All of a sudden, somebody like Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu, who before Islam, the Sahaba themselves, who were being oppressed by him, Umar who was torturing his cousins, Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu, who slapped his own sister to the point where she was bleeding from her ears. Umar ibn Khattab, who the Sahaba would say, I would believe the donkey of Al-Khattab would accept Islam, but I would not believe Umar would accept Islam. He accepted Islam. And he became a beacon of righteousness and justice. Somebody like Amr ibn al-As, who fought for 20 years against Rasulullah in every battle. Somebody who, even these poor, oppressed people who ran away to Abyssinia, the companions who were the weakest, Amr ibn al-As went to Abyssinia and he was trying to convince the Christian king of Al-Habasha, of Abyssinia, to hand over these oppressed people so I can bring them back to the dungeons of Mecca and give them more starvation and give them more torture. That was Amr ibn al-As. After Islam and after Rasulullah passed away, Amr ibn al-As was the reason the biggest one of the biggest Muslim countries today has 100 million Muslims, Egypt. That was because of the efforts of Amr ibn al-As after Islam, after Rasulullah died. Somebody like Suhail ibn Amr, who tortured his own children and who kept his son Abu Jandal in his own dungeon for more than a decade. Who was one of the most difficult episodes in the seerah is when the Sahaba said, if there was any way to disobey Rasulullah, it would have been the day of Abu Jandal, the day of the treaty, where the Muslims had to, Rasulullah had to sign a treaty with the Meccans that I will turn away those who accept Islam and come seeking aid. And the Muslims had to turn away the son of Suhail ibn Amr because he was the one doing the treaty, and they had to give him back his son. And he was crying to them, who are you sending me back to? Are you sending me back to those people who are going to torture me till I reject Islam, till I leave Islam? That was hard for us. That was hard for the Sahaba. Yet, the victory of Rasulullah was when somebody like Suhail ibn Amr accepted Islam after the battle. And after Rasulullah himself passes away, Suhail ibn Amr was the one who stood up in Mecca, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala inspired him to repeat the same words that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu said in Medina when Rasulullah passed away. Suhail ibn Amr, after Rasulullah passed away, stood up in the middle of Mecca when people started talking about leaving Islam. He stood up and told his people, من كان يعبد محمدا فإن محمدا قد مات ومن كان يعبد الله فإن الله حي لا يموت. Whoever was worshipping Muhammad, let them know that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has passed away. But Allah, the Lord of this world, the Lord of Muhammad, is everlasting and will not die. And he continues, and his mission and the purpose he put us on earth for continues. It's true that suffering is real. It's true that the devastation almost consumes our emotion. But the true victory is not simply to find a way to get those suffering people aid. The true victory is for us here in the United States to help affect change starting from here, from down. Somebody might say that's an impossible mission. Sure. It's as impossible as Constantinople, the biggest city in the world at the time of Rasulullah, becoming a Muslim city. Constantinople is Istanbul today, 99% Muslim. At the time of Rasulullah, 100, maybe 200,000 Christians lived in Constantinople at the time where Mecca had only maybe 2,000, maybe 3,000 Christians. It's as impossible as Al-Iskandariya, the bastion of Christendom theology, becoming a Muslim. It's as impossible as the Mongol horde and Genghis Khan becoming Muslim, when we know they're his own descendants become Muslim and they become carriers of Islam. That is the true change. That is the real way we can effect change, lasting change. I'm not saying stop what you're doing. I'm not saying do not rally. I'm not saying do not fundraise for Gaza. But we should start thinking about the big picture. We should start dreaming big. If Gaza taught us anything, it should be that nothing is impossible. It doesn't matter what your resources are. It doesn't matter what the situation is. You cannot lose the fact of what is your mission on this earth. What is our mission here in the United States? بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. غزة وغزة تشرب الأوجاع عطشا، تنوب الأرض عن كل العناء، تجوع ليشبع الأعداء منها، وتشبعها المجاعة دون ماء. This Yemenese poet is saying, Gaza is thirsty, and therefore it decided to drink all the suffering and all the pain of the entire world. This poet then says, the enemies of the people of Gaza are hungry, so they decided to eat all those innocent people, all their flesh, all of their humanity. We want relief. for our brothers and sisters. But again, we are trying in every way, but we keep trying simple solutions, easy solutions. We are not dreaming the way we're supposed to be dreaming. We're not trying to fulfill the goals that Rasulullah set for us, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put us on this world and in this country for. And like I said, it's not easy. I'm going to argue the opposite. I'm going to argue we're simply not trying hard enough. In fact, it is easier than we think. Look at what's happening in every mosque all over the United States. I'm sure it's happening here in Dalton. I'm going to give you a few examples that are happening in my masjid. The masjid I come from is in Dyer, Indiana. Small masjid. MashaAllah, you have a beautiful masjid. It's much simpler than your beautiful, magnificent masjid that I, MashaAllah, I'm very happy when I saw your masjid. May Allah reward everybody that helped build this beautiful house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In my masjid, 3 years ago, a man comes to our masjid. He's 75 years old, almost as old as Biden, President Joe Biden. He reads the Quran. He becomes Muslim. For 3 years, he's a part of our community. He starts donating his time. He was an electrician. He became part of the maintenance committee. He's fixing everything that is broken in our masjid. He's fixing the elevator when it becomes broken. A few months ago, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose him. He passed away. We reached out to his family and we tried to give him a Muslim burial. His family refused. We even offered to bury him on the expense of our community. His family refused. And they insisted on giving him a Catholic burial. Me and some of the brothers in our masjid decided to still go and attend the funeral. And I went and I attended his funeral, and he was in the middle of the church in his casket. They had dressed him in very fancy gold robes, made him carry a huge cross, and all his body was filled with Catholic and Catholic symbols. We asked permission from his son to pray for him. They gave us that permission, so we took that opportunity and we did Salat al-Janazah right then and there in the middle of the church on this brother. And he was a Muslim, and we knew he was a Muslim. And the last time I saw him, when he was sick, he could not speak. But as soon as he saw me, this is what he lifted his finger. This is what he said. Without speaking, he was saying, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah. And his family knew that he was Muslim. After we did Salat al-Janazah, I turned my face to the community, and the church was full. And I started talking about our beloved brother, how much he meant to us, how much we loved him, how much he helped us. And when I ended, the crowd was overjoyed. They started sharing with us about Thomas as well. And I knew Thomas very well, but I didn't know his background in this church. Turns out he was the pillar of this Catholic church. He was somebody who had daughters and sons, all of them were raised Catholic. All of his sons and all of his daughters had children, so all of his grandchildren were all raised Catholic. He even adopted 2 orphans, which he raised as Catholic, and they had children, and all of them were Catholic. This pillar of this Catholic church accepted Islam after reading an English translation of the Quran. 75 years old, after living his whole life, after bleeding for his church in every single way possible. His community could not even believe and accept the fact that he was Muslim. Another story. A man last year comes and knocks on our masjid's door. He was also a retired individual. He told me, I was born Catholic, then I converted to Protestant, then I converted to Jehovah's Witness, and I still have not found the truth, and I've decided to read the Quran. Will you read the Quran with me? I told him, yes, I'll read the Quran with you. And for 2 months, we studied the Quran together. And through that time, I started to learn about this brother. Turns out he was a veteran who served in the army his whole life, then went to get promoted in very important government positions. Then he started being part of the Republican Party, and he held very important positions. He had top security clearance. He spent his whole life hating Muslims, targeting Muslims, conspiring against Muslims, thinking of Muslims as their enemy, thinking about Islam as his target. And this brother, after studying the Quran, after reading the Quran, became a Muslim. He was 65 years old, almost as old as Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, too. There's many stories like this. Another story, a brother who was drunk, who was alcoholic, addicted to alcohol, addicted to smoking. He goes into a cigarette shop. The cigarette shop owner's name was Muhammad, and this brother Muhammad smiled in his face. The brother told me, I was in a state where the whole world was dark. I was in a state where I felt every single human being on earth hated me. And the only person that would smile in my face was this cigarette tobacco shop owner. I started going to that tobacco shop every single day. And every single time I entered that shop, Muhammad would smile in my face. Then I finally asked Muhammad, Allah forgive him for selling tobacco and selling cigarettes. But this brother asked the shop owner, why do you smile in my face? My wife does not greet me the way you greet me. My children do not smile in my face like you do. Why do you smile in my face? He told him, because my Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam teaches us smiling in the face of your brother is charity. This brother said, that Prophet that teaches that, I want to follow. This brother accepts Islam. He does his shahada in our mosque. From the moment he did his shahada, he stopped drinking alcohol. He stopped smoking cigarettes. The change was so dramatic in his life that his wife was impressed. His kids were impressed. His son accepted Islam just because he saw the change in him. His daughter-in-law accepted Islam just because she saw the change in him. His second son is right now reading the Quran. His third son is right now reading the Quran. His wife right now is also interested in Islam and reading the Quran. That's another story. And me here today visiting your community, I heard 2 or 3 or 4 stories in your own masjid. A brother who was talking to me that he's a health worker in a hospital in your community. Caleb, he told me, I heard a young girl just talking to her friend about Islam. And I became interested and I accepted Islam. And another brother, mashallah, Palestinian, who's working very hard in a prison. And his own testimony in your communities, in his own words, more than 800 shahada from one person. Change is possible. Change is in our grasp. We need to choose to do it. We need to choose to stand up and say we will be those agents. Brothers and sisters, I am here to you today, humble, blessed to be visiting you. I am part of Al-Furqan. I am a volunteer for this organization which has a mission to deliver an English translation to every single American. Al-Furqan, which is responsible on distributing the clear Quran, which in my opinion is one of the best English translations of the Quran in the market, has distributed over 4 million copies in the last few years. Al-Furqan, in the past 6 months, interest, because of what's going on in Palestine, because of what's going on in Gaza, they cannot keep up with the demand to the point that all of the copies that they had were distributed and they're printing new copies. And they need your help so that they have copies to print for the upcoming month of Ramadan, so that more people in this beautiful country can read the Quran. In my experience, every single person that I've met who's open-minded, kind-hearted, that simply reads the Quran, even though it's in English, even though it's a translation, simply listening and reading and getting to know the message that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent in the glorious Quran is more than enough for them to realize that this is the truth. And in my experience, I know some people will tell you different. In my experience, every single American that read the Quran accepted Islam. Simple as that. We simply need to make it available for them. We simply need to carry ourselves in a character, in a manner that they trust us enough to accept this gift from us. That's a responsibility that all of us need to bear. I hope that inshallah Rabbil Alameen you can help me to achieve this cause. I know I exceeded my time. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive me. I'll make the dua very quick inshallah Rabbil Alameen. Please say Ameen after me. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات الأحياء منهم والأموات. اللهم انصر إخوتنا في فلسطين. اللهم انصر إخوتنا في فلسطين. اللهم حرر البيت المقدس من الغاصبين. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى يا رب. اللهم حرر المسجد الأقصى يا رب. وأنت يا مقيم الصلاة أقم الصلاة إن الصلاة تنهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر ولذكر الله أكبر والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون.
الله أكبر الله أكبر.